The first time I saw Ethan Caldwell, he was hauling a beat-up duffel bag into our Brooklyn apartment, his boots scuffing the hardwood like he owned the place. His leather jacket hung loose on his broad shoulders, and his dark eyes flicked toward me for half a second before dismissing me entirely. That fleeting glance burned a hole in my chest, and I knew I was in trouble. My name's Lucas Hayes, 24, a graphic designer scraping by in New York's relentless grind. I'd answered Ethan's Craigslist ad for a roommate because the rent was cheap and the apartment was a stone's throw from the subway. What I didn't expect was him. 25, all sharp edges and quiet menace, like a storm cloud you couldn't look away from. He was a mechanic, hands always smudged with grease, his voice low and gravelly, like he'd smoked one too many cigarettes. We were opposites. Me, the anxious artist with a sketchbook glued to my hands. Him, the tough guy who'd rather throw a punch than talk about his feelings. But living with Ethan was like orbiting a black hole, dangerous, inevitable, and impossible to escape. Our apartment was a fifth-floor walk-up in Bed-Stuy, a chaotic mix of exposed brick, mismatched furniture, and half-dead plants I kept forgetting to water. Ethan's stuff took over fast, a punching bag in the corner, a toolbox under the coffee table, and a faint scent of motor oil that clung to everything. I didn't mind. It was his chaos that made the place feel alive. I'd catch myself watching him, when he'd lean against the counter, sipping black coffee, or when he'd sprawl on the couch, scrolling through his phone with a smirk. Every moment was a study in restraint, my heart hammering as I memorized the curve of his jaw, the way his lips twitched when he was amused. I told myself it was nothing, just a crush I'd buried deep. But secrets have a way of clawing their way out. The trouble started 3 months in, on a sticky August night when the AC broke. Ethan was sprawled on the couch, shirtless, a sheen of sweat on his chest as he nursed a beer. I was sketching at the kitchen table, pretending to focus on a freelance logo gig, but my eyes kept drifting to him. The way his muscles flexed when he stretched, the faint scar on his cheek catching the lamplight. It was torture. I'd always known I was gay, but I'd never felt it like this, like a current under my skin I couldn't shut off. "You gonna stare all night, Hayes, or you got something to say?" Ethan's voice cut through the humid air, low and teasing, but with an edge that made my stomach drop. I froze, pencil hovering over my sketchbook. I wasn't staring. I stammered, my face burning. Just zoning out. He snorted, taking a swig of his beer. "Sure, whatever you say, man." But his eyes lingered on me, dark and unreadable, and for a second, I swore I saw something flicker in them, something that wasn't just annoyance. Then he got up, tossed his empty bottle in the recycling, and disappeared into his room without another word. I sat there, heart pounding, wondering if I'd imagined it. The next week, I met Julian Navarro, the aloof heartthrob who'd turned my world upside down. Julian was 27, a photographer with a studio in Williamsburg, all sharp cheekbones and blonde curls that fell just right. He was the kind of guy who could walk into a room and make everyone feel like they were auditioning for his attention. We met at a gallery opening I'd been dragged to by a client. Julian was there, leaning against a wall, sipping a whiskey neat, his piercing green eyes scanning the crowd like he was above it all. When our eyes met, he smirked, and I felt like I'd been caught stealing. "You're the guy who did the posters for this place, right?" he said, sauntering over. His voice was smooth, like he knew exactly how to pull people in. "Not bad. Got a name?" "Lucas." I managed my throat dry. "Lucas Hayes. Julian Navarro." He held out his hand, and when I shook it, his grip was firm, his thumb brushing my knuckles just a second too long. "You should come by my studio sometime. I could use a designer with your eye." I mumbled something incoherent, already half lost in his charm. Julian was everything Ethan wasn't: polished, confident, magnetic. But where Ethan's intensity was raw and unguarded, Julian's felt calculated, like he was playing a game I didn't know the rules to. Still, I gave him my number, and when he texted me the next day to meet for coffee, I said yes without thinking. Back at the apartment, Ethan noticed the shift. I'd come home from coffee with Julian, my head buzzing, and find Ethan leaning against the counter, arms crossed, his jaw tight. "Out late again, huh?" he'd say, his tone clipped. I'd shrug it off, but the air between us was changing, growing heavy with things unsaid. I started spending more time with Julian, meeting him at his studio, where he'd show me his photos, moody black and white shots of cityscapes and strangers. He'd lean close, pointing out details, his breath warm against my ear. It was intoxicating, but it wasn't Ethan. One night, I came home to find Ethan sitting on the couch, a deck of cards spread out on the coffee table. He was shuffling them absently, his eyes fixed on me as I kicked off my shoes. "You're different lately," he said, his voice low, almost accusing. "What's going on with you, Lucas?" "Nothing," I lied, my heart racing. "Just busy." He didn't buy it. He stood, crossing the room in 2 strides, and stopped inches from me. "Don't bullshit me," he said, his voice rough. "You're running around with that pretty boy photographer, aren't you?" I swallowed hard, trapped by his gaze. "He's just a friend." Ethan's eyes narrowed, and for a moment, I thought he'd call me out. Instead, he stepped back, running a hand through his hair. "Whatever, man. Just don't get in over your head." He turned and walked away, leaving me standing there, my chest tight with guilt, and something else, something I wasn't ready to name. The weeks that followed were a tightrope walk. Julian's texts came faster, each one pulling me deeper into his orbit. He'd invite me to late-night gallery hops or impromptu shoots in abandoned warehouses, his charm disarming me every time. But back home, Ethan's silence was louder than ever. He'd stopped teasing me, stopped meeting my eyes. Instead, he'd disappear into his room or the auto shop, leaving me with the ghost of his presence, a half-empty coffee mug, a jacket slung over a chair. I tried to convince myself I was fine. Julian was safe, a distraction from the ache I felt for Ethan. But every time Julian's hand lingered on mine, I'd picture Ethan's calloused fingers, the way they'd brush against my arm when we'd pass in the narrow hallway. I was drowning in my own cowardice, too scared to face what I really wanted. One night, Julian invited me to a rooftop party in Williamsburg, thrown by some artsy friends of his. The air was thick with cigarette smoke and laughter, the city skyline a jagged silhouette against the purple sky. I stood by the edge, nursing a beer, when Julian sidled up, his arm brushing mine. "You're quiet tonight," he said, his voice low, teasing. "Thinking about someone else?" I laughed it off, but my stomach twisted. Julian had a way of seeing through me, his green eyes sharp like they could cut glass. Before I could respond, I caught sight of Ethan across the rooftop. He wasn't supposed to be here. He hated these kinds of scenes, but there he was, leaning against a railing, a beer in hand, his eyes locked on me. My heart stopped. How had he even known about this? "Friend of yours?" Julian asked, following my gaze. His tone was casual, but there was an edge to it, like he was sizing Ethan up. "Roommate," I muttered, my mouth dry. Ethan didn't move, just kept staring, his expression unreadable but heavy with something I couldn't place. I wanted to go to him, to ask why he was here, but my feet felt glued to the ground. Julian smirked, leaning closer. "He looks like trouble. You sure you can handle him?" Before I could answer, Ethan pushed off the railing and crossed the rooftop, his stride purposeful. The crowd parted for him, like they could sense the storm brewing. He stopped in front of us, his eyes flicking to Julian before settling on me. "We need to talk, Lucas," he said, his voice rough, barely containing whatever was burning inside him. Julian raised an eyebrow, unfazed. "We're in the middle of something, man. Maybe later." Ethan's jaw clenched, and for a second, I thought he might swing. Instead, He grabbed my wrist, his grip firm but not painful, and pulled me toward the stairwell. My heart pounded as I followed, Julian's eyes burning into my back. In the dim stairwell, Ethan let go of my wrist but didn't step back. We were so close I could feel the heat radiating off him, smell the faint tang of motor oil and sweat. "What the hell are you doing with that guy?" he demanded, his voice low, almost a growl. "Nothing," I said too quickly. "He's just a friend, Ethan. Why do you care?" His eyes darkened, and he stepped closer, pinning me against the wall with his presence, not his hands. "Don't play dumb, Lucas. I see the way you look at him. The way you look at me." His voice cracked on the last word, and my breath caught. He knew. Somehow he'd always known. "I don't." I started, but the lie died in my throat. His gaze was too intense, stripping away every defense I'd built. "Ethan, say it," he said, his voice softer now, but no less urgent. "Whatever it is, just say it." I wanted to. God, I wanted to tell him everything. How I'd been in love with him since the day he walked into our apartment. How every glance, every touch, had been tearing me apart. But fear clamped down on my chest, and all I could do was shake my head. "I can't," I whispered. Ethan's face hardened, and he stepped back, the space between us feeling like a chasm. "Fine," he said, his voice cold. "Keep your secrets." He turned and walked away, leaving me alone in the stairwell, my heart in pieces. The weeks after the rooftop were unbearable. Ethan barely spoke to me, his presence in the apartment a silent accusation. I'd hear him moving around at night, the creak of the floorboards, the clink of a beer bottle, and each sound was a reminder of what I'd lost before I even had it. Julian, meanwhile, was relentless. He'd text me late at night, show up at my freelance gigs, his charm a constant pull. But it was Ethan I couldn't stop thinking about. Ethan, who'd seen through me and walked away. One night, I came home to find Ethan sitting at the kitchen table, a bottle of whiskey and 2 glasses in front of him. He didn't look up as I closed the door, just poured a shot and slid it across the table. "Sit," he said, his voice rough but not angry. I hesitated, then sat, the air between us thick with tension. "What's this about?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He took a sip of his whiskey, his eyes fixed on the glass. "I'm done with this, Lucas." The silence, the dodging. "You're going to tell me what's going on, or I'm out." My heart sank. Out. Like moving out. He met my eyes, and the raw hurt in them hit me like a punch. "Yeah, I can't keep living like this, wondering what the hell I did to make you shut me out." "You didn't do anything," I said, my voice cracking. "It's me. I'm the problem." "Then talk to me," he said, leaning forward. "What's got you so twisted up? Is it that guy? Julian?" I flinched at his name. "It's not what you think. He's not you." Ethan froze, his glass halfway to his lips. "What's that supposed to mean?" I couldn't look at him. My hands were shaking, the whiskey untouched in front of me. "I'm in love with you, Ethan," I said, the words spilling out before I could stop them. "I've been in love with you since the day we met, and it's killing me because I know you don't feel the same." The silence that followed was deafening. Ethan stared at me, his expression unreadable, and for a moment, I thought I'd ruined everything. Then he stood, crossed the room, and pulled me to my feet. Before I could process what was happening, his lips were on mine, rough and desperate, like he'd been holding back as long as I had. When he pulled back, his forehead rested against mine, his breath ragged. "You're an idiot, Hayes," he muttered. "You think I don't feel it too?" I was too stunned to speak. All this time, I thought it was one-sided, that Ethan's intensity was just who he was. But the way he was looking at me now, his hands still gripping my shoulders, told a different story. The next morning, I woke up to a text from Julian. "Meet me at the studio. We need to talk." My stomach churned. I hadn't told him about Ethan, but Julian had a way of knowing things. When I got to his studio, he was waiting, his usual smirk gone, replaced by something colder. "You're with him, aren't you?" he said, not wasting time. "The tough guy? I saw the way he looked at you on that rooftop." I didn't deny it. "Yeah, I am." Julian's eyes narrowed. "You think he's good for you? He's a ticking time bomb, Lucas. You'll get hurt." "Maybe," I said, standing my ground. "But that's my choice to make." He stepped closer, his voice low. "You're making a mistake. I could have given you everything, connections, opportunities. You're throwing it away for some guy who's going to break your heart." I turned and walked out, his words echoing in my head. But as I stepped onto the street, I saw Ethan waiting for me, leaning against a lamppost, his eyes softening when he saw me. And I knew, no matter what Julian said, I'd made the right choice. Ethan and I were fragile at first, like we were both afraid the other would disappear. But every touch, every quiet moment in our apartment, built something stronger. We'd cook dinner together, laughing when I burned the pasta, or sit on the couch, his arm around me as we watched old movies. It wasn't perfect. Ethan was still guarded, and I was still learning to trust my own heart, but it was real. Julian didn't give up easily. He'd text me, leaving voicemails about new projects, dangling opportunities like bait. But I'd made my choice, and every time I looked at Ethan, I knew it was the right one. Still, Julian's words lingered, a seed of doubt that grew when Ethan's old habits resurfaced. Late nights at the shop, silences that felt too heavy. One morning, I found Ethan sitting on the fire escape, staring at the city. I sat beside him, the cold metal biting through my jeans. "What's wrong?" I asked, my voice soft. He didn't answer right away, just kept his eyes on the horizon. "I'm not good at this, Lucas," he said finally. "Letting people in. I keep thinking you're going to wake up and realize you're better off with someone like him." I took his hand, my thumb tracing the calluses. "I don't want him, Ethan. I want you. All of you. The messy parts, the quiet parts, all of it." He looked at me then, his eyes softening, and pulled me into a kiss that felt like a promise. "I'm trying," he whispered. "For you, I'm trying." A week later, Julian showed up at our apartment. I opened the door, and there he was, his usual confidence dimmed. "I owe you an apology," he said, his voice steady but lacking its usual edge. "I pushed too hard. I saw what you had with him, and I wanted to be that for you." I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to be angry, but the sincerity in his eyes stopped me. "Thanks," I said, "but I'm where I'm supposed to be." He nodded, a small smile tugging at his lips. "Take care of him, Lucas. He's lucky to have you." As Julian walked away, Ethan came up behind me, his arms wrapping around my waist. "You okay?" he asked, his voice low against my ear. "Yeah," I said, leaning into him. "I'm more than okay." We started building a life together, piece by piece. Ethan opened up about his past, growing up in a small town, hiding who he was to survive. I shared my own fears, the years I'd spent trying to fit into a world that didn't always accept me. Together, we found a rhythm, a balance between our jagged edges. The apartment became our sanctuary, filled with sketches and tools, laughter and quiet nights. One morning, we took a walk in a nearby park, the air crisp with autumn. We sat on a bench, Ethan's jacket over my shoulders, our hands intertwined. The world felt still, like it was holding its breath for us. "I love you," Ethan said, his voice steady, like he'd been practicing the words. "I love you too," I said, and for the first time, I wasn't afraid to mean it. We weren't perfect. There'd be fights, doubts, moments when the world would try to pull us apart. But sitting there, with Ethan's warmth beside me, I knew we'd face it together. Love wasn't just the spark or the kiss. It was the choice to stay, to fight, to build something real. And that was enough.